Good morning and welcome to the Killik & Co market update. This week, a number of Chinese companies that are listed on US stock exchanges are considering whether or not to move their listings elsewhere. The reason being that the US has just announced plans to increase audit requirements for these Chinese companies. The US has decided to do this after the scandal at Luckin Coffee. Luckin Coffee is a major rival to Starbucks in the US with over 3,500 stores. Luckin listed on a US exchange last year, initially very successfully, but later last year it appeared that there was a major accounting scandal and that over $300 million worth of sales had been fabricated. Following the uncovering of the scandal, there was a major crash in the share price, as you can see by this chart here, and a lot of investors lost a lot of money. According to the US, this would not have happened if there had been stricter audit requirements in the first place, and therefore the US has decided to push for greater transparency. The reaction of a number of other Chinese companies to this is to consider moving their stock exchange listings away from the US. For example, technology giant Baidu has already announced plans to consider moving to Hong Kong. We're waiting to hear what other companies will say. For example, Alibaba is a major Chinese company that currently has an American depository receipt listed on the US exchange. Since the announcement from the US, China has announced plans to exert a greater level of authority over Hong Kong, and this will surely not do any good to US-China relations at this very difficult time. The latest inflation numbers for the UK have been published, encompassing the full month of April when the entire country was in lockdown. Unsurprisingly, while everyone was in lockdown, there was a lack of demand in the economy, and the inflation number came in at 0.8%, far below the Bank of England's target rate of 2%. Although a number of economists expect inflation to rise over the longer term because of the amount of additional money that central banks are printing and pumping into the economy, at the moment, with everyone in lockdown, there is a lack of demand in the short term, and that is not good for inflation. It's quite interesting to have a look into the detail of this latest inflation number and see which areas fell the most and which, if any, areas actually rose in price. So have a look at this chart here. This shows that there was a particular fall in the price of motor fuel, partly because oil prices are down so much, and partly because there's a lack of demand for petrol while everyone is not allowed to drive anywhere. There's also been a fall in the price of clothing. No one's demanding clothing while they're not allowed to leave the house. And there's also been a fall in the price of gas bills, and that's actually because a new price cap was imposed by the regulator. That kicked in last month. That's the reason why gas bills have come down compared to last year. However, there have been some prices that have risen over the last month. These include fresh vegetables, and this is because we're now having to buy vegetables domestically rather than importing them from abroad, and actually the domestic supply is more expensive. There's also been an increase in the price of toys and also in the price of computer software, including computer games, and that's probably because everyone is playing more computer games and also working more flexibly, which requires a different type of software. So I think these prices that have actually risen do give you an idea of some of the companies that may possibly be benefiting from life in lockdown. The latest tranche of UK government debt has been sold with a negative yield. Great news for the government, who are now effectively being paid to borrow money, especially at a time when they need to be borrowing a lot to fund their coronavirus support programme. However, the negative yield does demonstrate that a lot of investors at the moment are willing to pay a very high price for a safe haven investment. Looking ahead to next week, the corporate calendar is looking very quiet in terms of companies reporting, but we'll be keeping an eye on relations between the US and China and also listening out for any new coronavirus updates. That's it from us. Have a great bank holiday weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.